Welcome. I'm your host, Michelle B. Griffin. As an author, speaker, and certified personal brand and PR strategist, I'm here to empower you to get visible, build your personal brand, and own your lane as a visible brand authority and thought leader in your space. I'm super excited you're here. Now let's get going with today's show. Welcome everybody to this week's episode. I am your host, Michelle B. Griffin. I am welcoming on the show today my friend in yellow. We're wearing yellow blazers for those who are watching the live or the replay. And she is going to tell us all about the things that really hold us up on getting out on social media. Is it challenging to write on social media? Are you in a button-up industry? Is it just hard to put yourself out there? Well, Jennifer Belmont Jennings is going to tell us all about how to share your expertise on social media. So storytelling on social to build authority. So welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me. And yes, we did the yellow on purpose.
We sure did. In fact, getting to the point, let's just get to the point about telling stories and being personable. You started talking about yellow blazers like a year ago. And I'm like, oh, I have a couple. So I am wearing my summer version and you're wearing yours. And that's how you first came across my feed. So if you are out on social or want to be out on social media, and by the way, Jennifer is an amazing estate and what is it? What's your official title again?
Attorney, trust and estates attorney.
So she knows her stuff. She is the go-to all about this. But what makes Jennifer so compelling is she shows up on social media, LinkedIn and Instagram, telling stories. Really fun stuff, but always ties it to a lesson in her work to drive business and create her authority. So for those who want to know how to do this, Jennifer, tell us about how did you get into it? And then where do we start if we want to do the same?
Like a lot of people, this started in COVID. I was feeling very powerless and trapped like everybody else was. And writing about just boring stuff was not appealing to me. And I always tried to add a little bit of humor and personality to what I wrote because I didn't want it to be boring anyway. But I had a moment where I thought, forget this. I'm just going to write something about like, what is this like for us right now? Because it's terrible. And it's hard and you're parenting and you have kids that you're trying to go to school and work. And I wrote something very personal about it. And all of a sudden people started saying, oh, I liked this, or clients were writing in saying they really enjoyed this piece or that piece. And then I read a book called Networked. It's by a bunch of women lawyers who got together during COVID, and they talked about getting active on LinkedIn. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I can do this. And so I started not understanding how LinkedIn worked, but I started just posting little bits. And then one time I decided maybe I should be funny. When my son's fish died, I had this picture and we lost a couple of the fish. And I made a joke about having, incorporating pets into your estate plan. And all of a sudden I had all these views on it. It was terrible, but relative to what it was, when like 6 people see your stuff, it was like, well, like 400 people saw this. So I got started learning a little more about LinkedIn. Okay. I started commenting more on people's posts and taking that chance. And that was a really big thing for me. I think that's one thing that's really important for people who want to get started is you can have great content, but if you're not getting to know people, nobody's going to read it. And so I would look for posts where I thought I could add some value, not hijack the post. You don't want to make it about you, but add something thoughtful that shows that you understand the topic or that you can bring something to the table and engage. And when you start engaging with people, other people start reading your content and you can start building, a network. So that was really helpful for me, but it really started with that book, reading that book. And that really got me going.
So many of us wanted to get in around COVID, and I got in around there too about posting, and it just became the place to be. But here's the thing. There's a lot of people listening, watching that still want to be there. They see it, watching all the posts, seeing your stuff. They're like, I want to do that. I have a lot of expertise that I can be sharing. But maybe they say, I am more buttoned up. I'm an introvert. I don't want to be self-promotional, or I work in a really regulated industry, or it's kind of boring. So all the things. And we're really just breaking the status quo on this today because you are in legal and you found the most incredible way to communicate what you do. But I mean, you brought in your dog, Peter Jennings. You talked about your succulent plants. Let's just say some of the things that you've talked about, like these are all anchor points in my mind. Yellow blazer, golf video. These are just recent ones. I'm sure you have a list of everyday things that you circle back to estate planning. Like, how do you do that? Is that just a gift or have you trained yourself to do this?
One thing that does help, if you've ever seen like the BBC Sherlock, when his brain's like going all over the place and, putting pieces together, when your brain does that, it is helpful for this. So I do have one of those brains that's constantly scanning and thinking and doing things all the time, much to my whole family's annoyance, I'm sure, because I'm always on. I think about how what I do is important, but sometimes it's intimidating and sometimes it's boring. And I look around at life and just how life happens, and I pay attention and I listen. I listen to what people say. I watch, I observe. And because I think about work all the time, probably more than I should when things happen, I just try to connect them or I jot them down. So there's definitely having some creative tendencies that you're born with is helpful. But I think that you can get there. What's important to remember is that you're not going to please everyone. Right? Everybody is different. We all enjoy different things. We learn differently. We have different interests. And if you're trying to talk to everybody, it's going to be overwhelming. But if you talk about the things that you know and you try to make them a little bit personal, that's going to resonate with somebody. And so I don't think if your goal is to be viral, the next Adam Grant, I wouldn't even start because that's probably not going to happen. Maybe it will. But I think just when you figure out who you are and you pay attention to what you do and you try to connect the dots and make connections to things in real life that resonate with people, others will read that and they enjoy it. And that's how you can start gaining some traction.
Absolutely. You're really kind of summarizing at a very high level, own your lane. Like when you absolutely have defined your difference, who you're for, not team everybody, as you said, somebody, and what you're equipped to do. Like that's your lane that you know and you love. I have to say that you have to love it too. Obviously you're working in it, you love it, but there's a lot of people I know who don't really love it. Find the Venn diagram of that and just stick to a really narrow lane. I know I can always go to your stuff and find some really valuable tips and lessons on estate, finance, tax. You're my go-to on this. Like I absolutely don't like finance stuff. Like my husband is such a geek on it, but I gloss over, but you're a go-to because you tell stories, you're relatable. So that's what it is. So in the context of what Jennifer's doing, like what you're saying, you're writing stories down. And this is what I would say when I started putting myself out there every day on LinkedIn on my challenge in 2021, my brain starts firing. So you get out there, you find a narrow lane is like what I say. But then I remember being in a conversation or reading something and my brain would start being wired. Oh, that's a post. That's a post. And that's what Jennifer said before we went live. You were in Boston this past weekend. Tell us the story about how you connected Boston to the Tea Party and something. Tell us about that.
Well, we were out on Cape Cod for vacation and we were in Boston for a few days and I took my son to the Boston Tea Party Museum and you get to throw tea into the harbor like they did. And I do a lot of tax stuff. And I thought, okay, well, this was all about taxes, no taxation without representation. And so I had him film me throwing the tea into the harbor. And I thought, I'm going to use this for something. And then today I was like, I should probably post today. And I decided to talk about the importance of estate tax planning and income tax planning. And yeah, it's kind of boring. It's not like that exciting, but everybody does need to think about that stuff when it comes to their income tax planning. You might not have an estate tax problem, but I thought, well, at least with a video that's kind of funny, it's a hook and it might get people to keep reading because it's.
And you tell me it's already doing really well. So you don't have to just do video, but you found a common problem. And that's what I think you're so good at, Jennifer. I know you're so good at. You're helping others. You're putting yourself out there. As I always say, visibility is not vanity. Visibility is being valuable. So you're finding a really relatable way in context with everyday life's problems, like your succulent plant dying. Oh my gosh, I forgot what you tied that to. But here I am calling you back all your stuff. What I'm saying for those, we're here today for people on the side. If you want to put yourself out there, I want you to follow Jennifer and just start writing down who you're here for, the problem you solve, in a narrow lane that you like to talk about it. And then let's just start making a list of everyday things. When I work with clients, we form a story bank. Like, what are some of the things, either in life, your lessons you've learned, and even every day right now that we could start thinking in terms? It's like a muscle. We're not going to come out strong the first day probably on this, but we're going to start thinking about that. We all know that stories are what get us to pay attention in today's attention deficit society. Is that correct?
I think stories do help. And the key is writing a story that is engaging, but not too long. Sometimes mine can be a little long, but I know people are reading to the end. So obviously I'm doing something right. I try to talk like myself. I think that's another big key. In the legal field and finance, I also have a finance background. It's very rigid and formal, but you're working with people. So I'm a person behind that really, smart sounding ADPH document that I wrote that doesn't have any humor in it. But you are a person. And I think when you are writing for social media in a profession like this, allowing your personality to come through is really helpful. A lot of people will say, oh my gosh, you are exactly like what I pictured based on what I've read. And I've had people who've reached out to me, and when we connect as a potential client, we hit it off immediately. It's like we're old friends, but it's because when I was writing, the way I did it and the way I taught, it resonated with them and it made them feel comfortable. And so it was easy to shift into a personal client relationship because I still teach that same way. We may be in a meeting talking about a 70-page boring document with big words, but I am just as animated when I describe things, when I give examples, if it's appropriate. I try to read the room. I try not to make a joke if it's not appropriate, but I think it gives you a chance when you write that story. Yes, sometimes it can be a little long, but if people feel like they're connecting with you, they're going to keep reading.
Absolutely. No, stories are really hooks. We know that stories are humanizing our content, making it really relatable is the key. Obviously, we want to stay committed to that. I'm not going to get into content strategy or anything like that. But you're telling me right now it's already paying off for you. It's building your authority. It's bringing clients in, and they say, "Wow, Jennifer, you're exactly like you are on your post." Like to me, that's the greatest compliment someone could ever give you. Isn't that right? That's perfect. So, write like you talk. I want to give a little tidbit. If you have a hard time writing like you talk, like how in the world do I do that? One of my favorite things is I pull up otter.ai or whatever talk to text thing you have. I like Otter because and I'm not an affiliate. I'm just passing on a good tool. Just sit there and just blurt out, and then it'll grab what I call your isms, the way Jennifer says something or Michelle or whomever it is. So you don't have that blank slate. You have something to work with. And I don't know about you, Jennifer. I love to write, but I cannot stand starting at a blank slate. I'm actually writing my book, a lot of it with audio. So have you ever done something like that? Or what's your tip to really talk or write like you talk?
I just start going and I don't worry about it sounding perfect or looking perfect. I just go and then I go back and I edit it as needed. So if I am inspired to talk or do a video or write a post, I just start jotting it down. If I'm going to do something that's really substantive, like an article, that's definitely a little harder. Sometimes I might start with an outline or I write the words as I want to see them. I do this with legal writing, like with drafting. If I have to draft custom provisions, I know what I want to say and I just say it, even if it sounds like a 5-year-old said it. And then once I have it on paper, I can refine it and make it sound the right way for the audience that is going to be reading it. So I think that that's a helpful thing to do. But I think just going, don't think about it. Because if you think about it and you try to make it perfect, you're just going to kind of paralyze yourself. But if you just get it on paper, the things you want to say, even if they sound ridiculous, and then you can go back and it's a lot easier to do it because you don't feel like you're really writing from scratch.
That's a good point. And you got to remember, these posts are fleeting for the most part in the feed. The articles live on. And that's where I want to bring up. We're going to go on to more thought leadership areas. You're doing some videos. Today, you had a video. I asked you about articles in a newsletter. And I just recently, after wanting to do one and talking about it for 3 years, I just introduced mine. I know. Because I wasn't owning my lane. The whole book writing process, I had to figure out where I wanted to be. I'm seeing right now, as we speak, everything's fickle and changes in the LinkedIn world. I'm seeing a lot of traction on articles and newsletters. So let's talk about that. And I think you could definitely try it out one day because a lot of the stuff you do, Jennifer, you could just plop it into an article and test it out. So what are your thoughts on articles and newsletters?
I think they are good things. I think personally for me, in the interest of time, I just haven't dedicated the time to do that. I know you mentioned me on Instagram, and I am laughable on Instagram. I will get something on LinkedIn that's like 20,000 people saw this. And on Instagram, it's like 12 people saw your post. I mean, it's a totally different game over there.
Yeah.
But I'm not willing to do what it takes. The job that actually really makes me money is doing the lawyering stuff.
Yes.
And while this does generate business for me, I actually have to do the work once it comes in. Right? So
Absolutely.
I just haven't spent the time to focus to really be Instagrammy or whatever that is. And I'm not even sure I'll really go there because it is so different. But I think articles and newsletters are really good and definitely something that I would explore doing when I have a little bit more time to sit down and do that. Like I'm working on our office blog right now. And so that stuff might transition into a newsletter. But I think that stuff is really good for the people who do want more, because I can only teach you so much in a quick video or in a short post. But if you really want to understand how that 529 account works, or what you need to think about with this kind of tax thing or that kind of tax thing, you gotta give me like a whole page or two to at least give you something. I mean, even a lot more than that, but just for regular people who are not in this industry, it requires more. So I think they can be really good tools if you have an audience of people.
Well, you can also archive your content. We cannot let our brilliance just fluff away in the feed. So ever since I've been posting, I have a whole archive system. But your videos, you could put into an article, get them transcribed for free. So you could embed your videos. So I'm not putting more work on you, but I know I just would love to see you test that out and report back to us, because articles are amazing. You're doing a tremendous job on this, Jennifer, with storytelling and social. Let's move in now to some of the areas you're building your authority, because I know you've been quoted in the media, you've been interviewed on TV, you're co-author a book. Tell us about that journey and what it looks like for you.
You have to get past yourself first as a critic. It is a little bit scary to put yourself out there, because I think we all know the internet is not kind. And I've fortunately been okay. I've had a couple of like weird things, but nothing, I'm not cool enough to have anybody that weird, I guess, but you have to get past that fear. If you want to be recognized for what you're doing, a lot of times you have to promote yourself. And I know that can be scary, but if you're just going to sit around and wait for everybody else to realize you're smart or you're creative or you're this or that, you're going to be sitting around all day, because there's a lot of competition out there. There are a lot of great people who do a lot of the same great things that you do. And so you have to figure out how to differentiate yourself, and you have to just be okay with that. And I feel like this has helped my confidence a bit, because I know that people enjoy what I write, and there's always going to be somebody that you can't please. That's just the way the world works. I mean, if I walk into a room, I'm not necessarily going to be best friends with everybody in the room. So the same probably applies to me, right? Even though we want to be the exception. Of course, I'm like Mary Poppins, everybody should like me and think I'm perfect. And that's just not how the world works. And so I think once you can get past that a little bit and get past yourself, and you just start talking, you put yourself out there, and you've got to keep in mind, remember, like, this is professional. There are some lines you don't want to cross. You got to be careful. And I think you need to pay attention to that, because it's important, because there are things that could come back to haunt you if you're too authentic and too honest. I keep some of my thoughts in my head. I keep a lot of thoughts in my head, and a good thing. Once you get past that fear of like, what will people think? What if nobody likes this stuff? There are people, they read it, they like it. Sometimes they lurk. Sometimes they tell you privately in a comment and you never knew they were paying attention, but there is somebody out there who is going to benefit from what you have to say. And so share it. And what's the worst that happens is the post doesn't do well, but then nobody sees it to know that you had a post.
Exactly.
I think you can get over yourself on that hurdle.
You can contain it. I don't think you ever cure it, because I feel like every time you want to go a little bit higher, grow. I mean, it's just human nature to have that fear embedded in it. And it's primal, but we can contain it. Because you've been doing this for like 4 years now. You've also cultivated an audience of people. When I see your stuff come by, I'm like, oh, I got to read it. Like, you're the one person I will go find if I don't see it, because I need some humor. I need some enlightenment about finances in a way that I'm not going to gloss over and be bored by. So you are owning your lane that way. Just like you said, you got to find what sticks for you, and, that zone of genius that you love getting out there. That's exactly right.
So you brought up earlier about doing what you love and being passionate about it. And I think that that's really important, because financial education for me is huge. We still have an issue in society where women are not as informed on the finances as they should be. And so I am incredibly passionate just from an educational standpoint of making sure that everybody has this basic foundational knowledge and understands what they have and why they have it. The goal is not to become an expert or a day trader or a tax expert. It's just to see the value in understanding that aspect of your life. When you are passionate about something, it really helps. And your motives becomes clear that your motive is to help people and your motive is to educate. And you're not necessarily being, not that I don't want business or speaking gigs. I mean, hey, I'm here, give me a call. But I really feel so good when somebody is like, oh my gosh, I learned this thing before. And now I just went and met with my financial advisor and I'm really excited. And that's huge. If you're passionate about what you do, that will always come through in your content.
I agree. That's what the definition of owning your lane is, that your reason for doing, not just your reason for being, but your reason for doing your work. I feel like work can be amazing when you're in the right place and you're doing everything lined up and you're really clear and you know how to communicate that and get out there with that confidence that we talk about. So that's so well said. We just have a few minutes left. I want to get into other ways you're building your thought leadership. You have appeared on TV, you speak, you get quoted in the media as an expert source, and you co-authored a book. So you told us you have to really, get comfortable. What's the next step to get to some of that level? Now, you don't have to do all this at once and it may not ever apply to you, but what's the next step for that?
There are a lot of things. I mean, putting yourself out there is the first way to do it. I mentioned earlier, commenting and getting to know people. The network on LinkedIn is huge. And you have no idea who you are closely connected to that may have some opportunity for you. Like that's how the book came up, was through my relationships on LinkedIn. And some of my speaking engagements started out from ties with where I was working and things like that, but then evolved into like, once you start doing a good job, then those people call you back on your own because they've quoted you before in something and they know you're a reliable source. So they call you back and have you on their show. So I think building those relationships is good. And you do have to be out there. If someone Googles you, you need to have stuff. Yeah. And they see that you have these credentials. Thing isn't going to lead to something overnight. It's not like I got to appear on the 6 o'clock news one night and then the phone was ringing off the hook. That's not how it works. You do all these things and they're all building blocks towards establishing your authority in a subject so that when somebody is thinking about using you, they look you up and they can see, oh, you popped up as a guest on these like 5 shows, or you were on this podcast, or you were quoted in AARP. And I think it just helps overall. So it's a long game. It's not overnight.
Absolutely. It's a journey. It's not a destination. Before we close out, I could talk to you all day. And I know you got a job to get back to and all the things. Where can we learn more about you?
Couple places, LinkedIn. I'm the only Jennifer Belmont Jennings. So you'll find me there. And then on Instagram, I'm money.t.legacy. Like the T thing was ironic. Then I am on Twitter, but I don't do a lot. I mostly follow the British royal family's drama on Twitter. But occasionally I post or comment or like stuff, but I'm like at Belmont Jennings. I think I barely even know what or it's not Twitter, it's X, as my son would correct. If you Google me, I pop up. I work at MGD Law in St. Louis, Missouri, and we've got a website and bio and all that stuff on there. But I'm pretty findable. So I'm happy to connect with people on those professional platforms.
Putting yourself out there, again, as I say all the time, visibility is not vanity. It's not about going viral. It's about being valuable for the lane, that knowledge, expertise that really lights you up. You're passionate. It's your purpose to help, serve, solve, support. And, that's what we're here for. That's what business is about. So this has been a tremendous episode. Thank you so much for guesting, Jennifer. I had a blast getting to know you today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody. That is another episode. I want to say before we leave today, if you want to learn how to get visible, put yourself out there, head on over to michellebgriffin.com and grab my free visibility masterclass. It tells you the 3 ways and my special formula about getting out there, just like what Jennifer spoke about today. So it's going to help you take that first step. So keep putting yourself out there. You have a brand to build, a message to share, and people to impact. I'll catch you next time. Take care. That's all for today. In the meantime, are you ready to grow your visibility, personal brand, and thought leadership? Then head on over to michellebgriffin.com for free resources to get started and get going today. And until next time, thanks for listening.